Hello and welcome to another episode of the Wrap Up, where I'm joined by Kyle Brickman live after the Raptors 111-99 loss to the Orlando Magic. It was their second loss in a row to the Magic in Orlando, and it brought them to a grand total of 1-11 on the road, I believe, for the Raptors this season. So yeah, the internet is panicking. Raptors Twitter is exploding, and we're here to talk about it. Kyle, I know we're gonna talk about the Raptors season in general because me and you haven't really talked much this season. But let's start with the game. Where did things go wrong for the Raptors to you? I guess start wherever you want to start.
I don't even understand. I don't know if there's necessarily a point, but I don't understand actually what happened to this team. I get that whatever Siakam had early foul trouble, that's understandable. He had same with VanVleet, but there's just like they were physically dominated on the offensive glass. They were physically they didn't offensive rebound the ball well at all, which are those two staples of their of their play. I guess they turned Orlando over a lot, which is like the Raptors blueprint, but they couldn't really get anything done with those turnovers. Their offense was so poor that it doesn't really matter that they have so many extra possessions. They couldn't capitalize on it. They shot 24% from the field, or from the three, sorry, 40% from the field. And it's odd because like they turned the ball over 9 times. That's actually a kind of terrific performance. And I until I checked the box score, I was kind of shocked because it felt like they were so poor offensively and so just discombobulated that I would have expected more turnovers. But it was actually pretty low turnovers. I think maybe the story is they got killed on the glass. But I don't actually know where to start with this one. It just seemed, for whatever reason, that the Magic were just a better team. It's a similar feeling to the New Orleans game that like a week ago, where the Raptors are basically overmatched physically. The difference being that the New Orleans team is a good NBA team who have given a lot of people trouble, and the Magic are supposedly the worst team in the league. And frankly, I'm not even sure they're actively trying to win. So what does that say about the Raptors?
Yeah, I mean, I'm as confused as you about the season as a whole. But in terms of this game, this is a crazy stat. The Raptors
I know.
forced 18 turnovers and had 9 points off the turnovers,
It's
whereas the
crazy.
Magic forced 9 turnovers and had 23 points off of them. So, like you said, the transition offense was garbage for the Raptors. It doesn't really matter if you're forcing turnovers or if you're creating second chance points if you're not capitalizing on them. And yeah, on the Magic, it felt like every time they got an offensive rebound, they were putting it back, and every time the Raptors got an offensive rebound, nothing was really, like, they were just botching layups. And then the 3-point shooting is also obviously a huge concern. 24% tonight. Just Gary really the only one who's been able to knock down threes over the past couple of weeks. With Fred struggles, with OG's struggles. And so, yeah, like I'm pretty confused too. I think the New Orleans game is a good example. Like the Raptors, when they go against these teams that are more athletic than them and just as big as them, or if not bigger, they really struggle to impose their kind of style on the game. And when you don't have the style advantage, you're just not that, I guess, skilled of a team. So if you're not kind of dictating the terms of engagement, it can look like this. Other than that, though, like I will say last game was a worse loss. Do you agree with that? Like last Orlando loss was worse for me.
Okay, so from like a basketballing perspective, sure, but then like the sort of more abstract idea of like they just lost the worst team in the NBA on the road. Surely they'll come motivated to this game and they'll set the record straight. This has to be a Raptors win. They learned their lesson. They were caught off guard, and they didn't really look promising in this game either. So I get like
That's true.
in a vacuum they probably looked worse on Friday, but oof. Man, I actually am not sure this is a better loss, so to speak. I would have expected much more of them tonight in response to what was a really bad loss.
That's true. I guess I only say that because They played hard. Like, I'll give the Raptors that. They came out, the defense was amazing in the first half. For most of the game, the defense was really good. The offense was terrible, and we can talk about that. Um, but like the effort was definitely there in this game. And I thought last game it was just an embarrassing performance. Whereas this game, really, they did have a lot of good looks from three that just weren't going in. They were hustling all over the place. They were making extra efforts on defense. But credit to the Magic, I thought they played really well today. But like you said, I remember when the Raptors were playing these back-to-back series earlier in the season. They played Chicago, Philly, Miami, and all of them were 1-1. And every time someone asked Nick Nurse, like, is it just hard to win these back-to-backs? And he was pretty much like, yeah, like to win 2 games against the same team back-to-back is just extremely hard. And so there's no excuse tonight. Like, you can't go out there and be like, well, we didn't knock down open shots, whatever. It's like, no, like you can't lose twice back to back, really in any setting, but especially against the Orlando Magic. So in that sense, it's super concerning, and that's why the internet is currently exploding.
Uh, and it's tough to resist like the urge to, come out swinging in the way. And I really don't want to do that, and I don't want to jump into like the idea of having a conversation about like the direction of this team or et cetera, et cetera. But you know, it might be kind of necessary to talk bigger picture stuff with, from I'm more critical about the bigger picture and the vision than I think I've ever been. That's what I'll
Yeah,
say.
let's talk about that. The only thing I want to say on this game, lastly, is way too many mid-range shots for me from the Raptors today. And like this is the chart right here, and it's like if you're going to be the Raptors and you're not a very skilled offensive team, you kind of have to win the math battle. And
Mm,
Nurse has talked about how he wants to go in the direction of layups and threes out of the, because last year it was a lot of mid-range shots, and the idea was everyone's developing, everyone has freedom, yada yada yada. This season at the beginning, he said he wants to limit those kind of shots. And like if you look at the missed shots tonight, it's a ton of mid-range shots. And it's not, it's guys like, I'm okay with Trent taking them, I'm okay with Siakam taking them. Outside of that, I'm really not okay with a lot of guys taking them. And they took a ton tonight. And yeah, the offensive process tonight was really, really bad. And maybe this leads us into a bigger discussion about the team, because I felt like this season has been way too much like your turn, my turn. There's not a very clear offensive hierarchy outside of Siakam, who is obviously the top dog. After Siakam, though, it just feels like, all right, it's my turn now, and now it's going to be Gary's turn, and now Scotty's going to take his, like, there's no cohesion. There's not a lot of ball movement. And that's kind of where I start in terms of, I mean, defensive is a whole nother issue, but in terms of like, there's clear body language issues with this team, and there's just clear like something is amiss. Like guys don't seem happy in their roles, whatever it is. And that's why it starts to me with like the offensive end, because it's just like who is doing what on this team and who has accepted which role on this team. So that's kind of where my worries start.
and frankly, it'd be one thing if their offense was like a heliocentric, like Luca or Harden in Houston offense with Siakam being the focal point. But it's not even really that. They haven't handed the keys to him entirely. They just happen to resort to him really, really often. And it's one thing like I guess it's different because it's not like they're going to have Siakam run 4,000 pick and rolls like in the same way you would with Luca or Harden. So you can't really craft an offense around him in a way. But
Mhm.
it's odd to me that they have, yeah, an offensive hierarchy where you have a really obvious. It's really obvious who your best player is. That's Pascal. I don't think there's like much debate about that at all. And yet, um, there are times in which like he doesn't even finish as like the person with the most attempts or the person with the most touches, the highest usage, and that is really odd to me
Well,
because
tonight
there's
he didn't.
no, there, but even with like I think nearly every single game he should be the person touching the ball the most. Or you
Mhm.
go the opposite direction, which is like let's have and that's not like this is actually the hardest thing to do in basketball is like create an offense where everyone touches the ball equally and everyone's cutting with purpose and screening, and there's like some sort of natural offensive flow that's collaborative, and you have this beautiful offense that's like a joy to watch. That's not easy to
Like the
just create.
Celtics.
Yeah, like that's or the Warriors. Like and it's like
Yeah.
okay, fine. So the Raptors can't be the Warriors. That's not what I'm complaining about. But
But
it's
the
just odd
Raptors
that
could be the Celtics with what you
yeah,
just
they
said.
have exactly. They have high IQ basketball players. Like they're not they yeah, whatever. You don't have like the Steph Curry gravity or the Jason Tatum gravity ISO type stuff, but you do have highly talented basketball players. You need to be able to like empower these guys. And honestly, like it just doesn't the offense feels so stagnant, and it's not like movement. Like I get that movement doesn't equal good offense. Like whatever Stotts in Portland forever had the offense like the most off-ball screens and cuts whenever they were like a pretty middling team. Didn't really matter, but it does feel like sometimes it's such a slog offensively. It's like so joyless, and the ball doesn't hop around. Nothing like they pass the ball out of a double team, and nothing is actually created out of that. There's like the floor is shrunk to one side. You have a numbers advantage on one side of the floor, and nothing comes of it. So I'm searching for answers here. I don't know what the answer is offensively.
Yeah. I think Siakam's the right place to start. When we think about what is wrong with this team in general, I think what happened was to start the season, Siakam masked a lot of their flaws by just
Mm.
being this top 5, top 10 guy. Like he was on another level. They were in a lot of clutch games and winning them mostly because of him. And since he's come back from injury, he just hasn't been the same player. Like he's still been good, but he hasn't been top 10 in the league player since coming back from injury, which you kind of expect. Tonight he was 6 for 16. That's not good. Um, so I think a big problem is that now that he's gotten back, he just hasn't been good to carry all the other guys' deficiencies. And like again, when we think about what's wrong with the Raptors, let's be honest, Fred is having a horrible season. Scotty is
Yeah,
having a really bad season, especially if you expected a jump. Koloko is their starting center, and although he's been a pleasant surprise, he is not ready to play starting center minutes, let alone I don't know about backup center minutes for a good team.
to be
So
fair
like
though,
that's
he did start the game and then play 7 minutes. So like the
right.
nurse does his weird starter stuff.
But that makes me think like, do you guys want to win here? Because if you want to win
Yeah,
games, why aren't we
yeah.
starting Kem Birch at center? Like it
Well,
just
and
doesn't make a lot of
look,
sense.
it might be an overreaction to go into like the do you want to win games mode, because we can have that talk, and I don't want to be the people who are like jumping to conclusions. So maybe we ought to slow it down a bit. But like
Hmm.
I will say, if we want to have the do you want to win games talk, like I'm not against that as a general concept. I think there should be some sort of reshuffle, whether that be internally, like a conversation about like this is what our offensive identity is going to be. This is who we want taking touches. This is who we want, touching the ball most, bringing the ball up, uh, being like empowered to play free safety on defense. Like, yeah, in general, the defense was pretty good tonight, and they were at least high effort. But there were so many times in which the Magic just basically abuse Fred as a free safety. They would run a pick and roll on the other side, or he'd be involved in the pick and roll and they'd be switched onto a bigger guy. For whatever reason, he gets switched onto a bigger guy because he's trying to jump a passing lane, etc. And I can't. It feels like maybe 200 times Bol is just like over Fred's back, like snatching a rebound like out of his
Hmm.
hands. That happened, I think, no exaggeration, a million times tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not ready to go there towards like the tanking talk because I just think they're too skilled. Like when you look at the talent
No,
on
yeah,
this team,
exactly.
it's undeniable, right? So they need to figure their stuff out and like every team hits adversity and either you figure it out or you don't. Like I still believe that this team has the talent to figure it out, but they do need a shakeup. Like whether it is a hierarchy thing, whether it is a trade, whether it is a benching of a guy just to show some accountabilities. Like there needs to be a shakeup. And I wrote on Twitter, like, if Scotty or Fred is having a terrible game, which they've had a lot of recently, why do they deserve to close the game? Like Nick so far has been very safe and that he's not trying to piss anyone off, even in the media. Like you ask about Scotty, and he goes, "No, I'm happy with Scotty." It's like, no, you're not. Let's be honest. But he's playing the guy who doesn't want to shake anything up, right? And who wants to act calm and like everything's okay when it's not. But I think there has to be some sort of shakeup in that regard where like we're not happy with this and we're ready to take like extreme measures, whether that means benching Scotty or Fred. Honestly, I thought both of them were a lot better today than what we've kind of come to expect in the past. Like shots just didn't go down, but Scotty in particular, compared to the first Orlando game, I was really happy with his kind of effort and focus today. Like he was not getting just beat for silly rebounds or backdoor cuts like in the first game. Like he was focused and he was taking the right kind of shots in the paint. The touch has like left him a little bit, but he'll refine that, I'm sure. Um, Fred took 11 shots today after taking like 20 last game, so I like that he's not just chucking them up as much as he has in this past little stretch here. So like, yeah, I think today was really kind of just an example of OG not being there, Siakam not being good enough to carry them, and it's a tough loss, but it's not the end of the world. Um, they just, to me, honestly, this team needs to get us, because here's let me, I know I'm ranting, but to go back to like the tank top, here's why you can't do it is like not only are they too talented, but Fred, OG, and Siakam are all coming up on deals in the next year. So either this offseason or next offseason, and you want to keep those guys, and so you have to keep them happy, and you can't tank 2 years out of 3 years and keep those guys happy. So to me, it's like more than anything about that. So you have to compete, and you got to figure out ways to compete while keeping everybody happy. But yeah, that's hard right now.
Also, I mean, I think the ultimate point is that like you're never going to get good value for Siakam, and Siakam will always be too good to like be on a tanking team. Like he's the same thing with DeMar. The DeMar led Raptors for a while, which is like he's just going to like drag you to 30 wins and beat
Mm-hmm.
like these like sort of middling teams, and then like have a few positive wins. So that like they can never trade Siakam and get full value for him, and Siakam's too good to tank. So that'll just
People
never
are
happen.
people are really bothering me with the trade Siakam stuff, which I've
Mm,
seen online in the past couple of days, because it's like, how spoiled can you get that you haven't had a star this good
mm.
since Kawhi? And not only is he this good, he's developed as a Raptor into being this good. And now you want to trade him for a chance at like a whiff at maybe something good? How did this like, oh, okay, it bothers me. Because the same people who say that are like are like hating on Scotty right now. And it's like, so how did that tank go? You
Mm.
know? It's just
Yeah,
like it takes a
exactly.
long
Yeah.
time for young players to win in this league. So I don't understand why you would want to trade Pascal, but
I will
it's
say
not
the
that's not here nor there.
yeah, the frustrating part, and I think the reason people are so eager for a shakeup is it's not like this is a new team. It's not a new regime. Like you've had the same GM for nearly a decade. You've had the same head coach for 4 years. You've had the same like three starters for at least 3 years. And if you don't go by like the number of games, Siakam and OG were starters a lot of the time in 2019. So these guys aren't like this isn't a new team. It's not like, oh, you have to give them some time to figure it out. Like the core of this team has played together a lot, a lot, a
Mm-hmm.
lot, a lot. So that's I guess why the calls for like a reshuffle are coming, because it's I don't think people have a lot of patience. I don't think people want to wait for this team to like reconfigure itself. Like this should be configured, and I sort of agree with that in a way. Like this should be configured. I don't think this is like what are we? This doesn't need like time to gel. It's been 4 years.
Yeah. And also like there was a lot of talk this summer about the Rico runs, everyone playing together. Paul George being like, coaches, if you guys don't get off to a good start, it's on you. And then they come out and this is their start. So yeah, to me, there's something clearly wrong, not in the on-court fit of the team necessarily, but in the character kind of combination. Like, there's something clearly amiss in terms of everyone being happy in their role and everyone supporting each other and trusting each other. And you see these things on the court. They don't trust each other defensively. They're not clapping on the bench when guys like when role players make a nice play like you should be. Like, there's just all these kind of intangible issues, which I think are such an underrated part of like building a good basketball team, and they're hard to quantify, so we don't talk about them too much, but there's something off with the intangibles of this team. Like, I'm not saying they hate each other or anything like that, but it's pretty clear to me at this point in the season that like it really shows up in the like lack of consistent execution and effort. Like, some games they're there to play, some games maybe they went out the other night or whatever, they're not focused and they're not there to play. Some quarters their defense looks amazing, and then other quarters, like, it's the worst defense in the league. And that to me only come like that's not a skill thing. That's a character and like intangibles thing, that there's like the formula is just not right, if we want to use a very scientific term.
Extremely scientific term. Yeah, there is something off, and ultimately, like, it uh, they're going to talk about trades until the trade deadline. Like that's always how it is, and we'll see where the Raptors are at in even 2 weeks. Like, we'll see where the Raptors are at Christmas, because things can change very quickly. Like, um, it's odd. There's just some weird inconsistencies. That they've won 3 games on the road, um, despite the fact that it's not like they have tremendous home court advantage. Like, I get there are other aspects, but at this point, the Raptors' home court advantage isn't like, it's not wild. That arena isn't what it used to be. There's just some weird stuff going on, and it's early in the season, so I'm not panicking. But with that being said,
Yeah.
there is
My
something wrong. I think we should have the Fred conversation at least. But I like the way you brought up, like, whether or not he should be closing games. Like, to me, I just don't see how he's part of closing lineups, especially in matchups like Orlando, where they're kind of hunting him. Like, they're getting Cole Anthony they're put Fred on Cole Anthony. They're getting Cole Anthony in the high pick and roll, or running him off the screen, and then basically isolating a big on him, or like finding some way to manipulate Fred. And it's not good. It like there if there isn't an obvious matchup for him, I don't know why. I get why he's earned the right to close games. I just don't know why he should be closing games. It's tough to say. I love Fred, and I think that he's, even like, especially on the court, he's one of the few people who can actually, like, is able to talk to the other Raptors, and sort of like, he's a calming presence. He's a generally good presence, but from a basketball perspective, just he cannot match up against every team anymore, especially when he's not hitting his threes. It was one thing when it's like, okay, well, he's a bit of a mismatch in this way, or he can't really finish around the rim, but at least he's a knockdown shooter, and he's not. He's actually not this year at all.
Yeah. No, he's like, I hate to use the term, but he's kind of broken. And it's really sad to watch him. Like, as much as he was definitely making a difference in this game on both ends of the floor, but the way this guy played to open last season when he was an all-star was like such a dramatically better player that it doesn't make any sense to me what's happening with him. Because yeah, he's getting picked on defensively a lot, like you said, which never used to be the case in his career. And it's not just the bigs, but he's also getting beat off the dribble way more than we're used to seeing. And that was the one thing, at least on defense, you could always count on Fred for, was like, he's gonna keep his man in front of him. And we just haven't seen that this season. Like you said, the 3 ball's not going down. Like, a game like this, I think he should close, because who is your option to kind of, like, replace him? I don't really see like a
Yeah,
great
exactly.
option. And you need a point guard, right? They don't have a backup point guard. That's a huge problem. But I think there have been games, like I pointed out, the Celtics loss at home the other day. That was a game where I don't understand why he closed that game. He was so bad on both ends. Um, I
And
kind of trust, like, go ahead.
no, go ahead. So no, you go ahead.
No, I kind of trust Fred is gonna figure it out as the season goes on. But I was saying that since the beginning of the season, like, oh, he's gonna shoot himself out of this slump. I'm not too worried about it. It's definitely worrying. Um,
It,
but
the bigger concern for me is that earlier in the season, or when guys are on prolonged shooting slumps, like, there's still, if you have a reputation of a shooter, you have shooting gravity, you can space the floor. If you're in the corner for like a pick and roll, you can like come off of a screen and have people actually have to like go over top of it or hedge. Like it has to, like all this kind of stuff that manipulates the defense. This is stuff that matters, that beyond just hitting shots. And so, it, like extremely good shooters who aren't making shots even for months on end still get, still have a good positive effect on offense because of gravity. But it seems like over the past month, or maybe a little bit less than that, like he does not actually create the same spacing he used to. I watched a couple Siakam possession where he's throwing the entry pass, and Fred's guy is like turning his back fully to Fred and running to Siakam to hard double like on the catch, that was like unheard of for a guy who's a knockdown shooter. That doesn't happen for dudes who like can hit open shots. You would never immediate double off the catch. And that's happened a lot recently. Like, he doesn't command the same respect as a floor spacer. That's what's really bad. It's fine if you're not making shots as long as you space the floor, but he does not. He's not commanding the same respect, and it's difficult. I think Zach Lowe's talked about it for years. It's like we need to figure out, like, some guys have reputations as shooters and aren't making shots. Like, if you just like, what's how much does it matter if you're knocking down shots if you have a reputation as a floor spacer? And it's really hard to measure, like without really in-depth player tracking data, which is either private, like, or non-existent. But it just, eye test wise, the gravity isn't there.
Yeah, Caitlin Cooper wrote something about that exact topic on 538 a little while back. I think it was about Eric Gordon and kind of
Yeah.
gravity versus if you shoot or if you're hitting shots
34% from
versus.
three, and guys are like, he's getting face guarded in the corner. Like,
Yeah.
he gives so much respect.
Yeah, I haven't really noticed that. I'll have to pay more attention in terms of Fred not having the same kind of gravity that he has in the past. But I mean, it makes sense. Like it's a really prolonged stretching back to last season, the end of last season where he hasn't been able to hit threes. So yeah, that makes some sense. And like, not to get off of Fred, but like this also goes to Nick Nurse and the whole Raptors strategy, which is like, since Tampa, we've been hearing, we believe that we can develop shooting, and we are drafting guys without that priority. We're drafting guys with these other priorities, 6'9" length, defense, and we are going to develop shooting. Well, I think the what is the saying? The verdict is out. The jury is out. What is it? The verdict?
I think
The verdict's
wouldn't
out.
it, the jury's out, the verdict could be in. Like, if
Okay,
the
the
jury's
jury
out.
is out on the Raptors developing shooting with this group of players because they just don't have enough of it. Like, Siakam is what he is at a shooter at this point in his career, I think. Like OG and Fred, whatever, we'll leave that. But like Banton and Achua and Flynn and Boucher, all of these guys, they haven't taken the steps that would be required to say, like, yes, we are successfully developing shooting. And like the stat I wanted to bring up as our tweet of the night, I don't know that that's sponsored by, but like the Raptors are shooting less than 30 from
Unsponsored.
on for the last 14 games, they're shooting less than 30% from three. So
You can't win NBA games like that.
exactly,
You cannot win games like that.
yeah.
It
So
just
I do think Fred is definitely deserves a bulk of the blame for this season. I think Scotty also deserves a bulk of the blame for this season. But it's hard to find answers other than like, yeah, accountability. If you're not playing well, you don't end the game. But at the end of the day, as like simple as it sounds, like those two just need to figure it out if they want to have success, right? Like there's no one on the bench who's coming. Malachi's not sitting there like, ooh, just give me the minutes and I'll produce like Fred. Like, no, that's not possible. We've seen that script, right? Like those guys don't have the same type of ceiling that Fred does. So for the Raptors to get anywhere near where they were, those two have to just play better. And
eh,
yeah.
like, just as like you mentioned, there's no track record of them developing shooting with this group. I agree, but in general, this sort of project where like you're not prioritizing shooting in a league that needs spacing more than anything. You're not prioritizing rim protection in a league with a bunch of like super tall dudes who like get to the rim at will, and like you'd be nice if like I don't know, maybe there was some deterrent around the rim. Like those
Yeah.
are two pretty essential parts of basketball that they've kind of ignored in a serious way. I mean, you could argue that the Koloko pick is like a rim protection pick, but he's not in the rotation. Um, and it's tough. Like this is an experiment that is kind of backfiring at the moment. You got to have shooting. You just can't. If I'm looking at the Raptors like starting lineup, especially when Gary's comes off the bench, there's not one knockdown shooter beyond maybe Siakam, and you want him really on the ball anyway. You don't want him spacing the floor. So they just don't. You can't play four non-shooters around Siakam. It's not setting him up for success.
Yeah, for sure. Porter is the guy that they brought out in to do that, and he's just been unhealthy with a very weird injury that I do not understand. But we can talk about that another time. I will say like okay, Fred and Barnes, that's on them. Like I don't really blame Nurse for that. That's on them to figure their stuff out and like play better, right? At the end of the day, it's not always going to be your ideal situation in terms of whatever running pick and roll or for Scotty having the ball in his hand. Like you need to figure out ways to play better in the current system. But yeah, I don't think it's true that they haven't prioritized those things. I think they've struck out because like that's what the rumors have said. Like Malcolm Brogdon, they tried to go and get him. They struck out. Andrew Nemhard, it sounds like they tried to draft him and they struck out. They have this interest in Pirtle for years. Like it seems like they've just been close on getting these type of players that they clearly need. But yeah, like they haven't prioritized it enough, and we're really seeing the issues with that. So I want to talk about like trades and kind of what holes that they need to plug. But before we do, let's talk about Manscaped. Um, Manscaped.com. It's holiday season, guys. Everybody has to go get holiday presents. So why not do it now? Get out ahead of it so you don't have to be at like the Eaton Center on Saturday with hundreds of kids running around you. Just order from Manscaped.com. You can get these little boxes that come with like a razor and a hair trimmer and some creams and lotions, like $60 minus 20% off, free shipping with the code wrap up. That's a great deal. So that's RAPUP code wrap up at manscaped.com for 20% off. And yeah, they have great products for male grooming, we should say. Do you have anything to add to the Manscaped read? Have
Nothing
you
really.
used
Yeah,
your product yet, Kyle?
absolutely. No,
Same.
they're it's like a really cheap uh, grooming set for like if you look at whatever in your local uh, department store, like the Phillips razors are just $80. Like you can just get a cheaper one for what is that, $60, 20%, $48 or whatever it is. Like it's that's almost nothing. Free shipping, it's almost nothing. So I
Yeah,
think
I,
if
I
you
use mine. I used mine too, and I had a great time. Very safe. No, it's very hard to like cut yourself with it with the electric razor.
it's
And yeah,
waterproof or water filling. You can like clean it off easily. Like it's nothing worse than like just shaving your face and like you got to like knock it on the thing. You know, it's nice.
yeah, it's a good
It's
product.
they're
All
quality
right,
products.
that's it, Manscaped. So let's talk about what would you prioritize if like you could add one thing? Would it be a shooter? Would it be a center? Like what would you prioritize for this team?
Yeah, it's shooting, and I have this comment here from Timber or Timbre, depending on I don't know how we're trying to interpret that one. She says can't blame the coach for not hitting open threes. Yeah, I agree. Like whatever, it's the players missing shots, but you can blame the coach for not playing lineups with shooters. Like you can blame the coach for not like, well, how come uh there's like they're so insistent on running like five guys together who are basically non-shooters. Like um I need to see Malachi Flynn.
I agree.
I get that whatever, like he hasn't had a proven track record of being like a track record of being a knockdown shooter in the NBA, but like in theory, he should be hitting shots. Like he can hit
This
shots. I watched
season,
the summer league highlights. I watched like the didn't he dropped 70 points in a pro am game. He was hitting shots there. Like there's some proof, there's some evidence. Like
no, this
let's
season he's one of the best 3-point shooters on a albeit
Yeah,
low
I was gonna
volume,
say.
but like
Like the sample size is so low that it's
but
really really
still,
tough
when you
to.
have this few shooters on the team, I agree with you. I don't understand why he's not playing.
I just, as an aside, Mauricio says, "Please don't solicit goods and services." Man, what do you want me to be broke? Come on, dude.
Um, yeah. For me, I would actually go the center direction, and I think like even this game was a good example of like Birch in that little stretch in to start the third quarter was you just saw how much better he was than Koloko. But now imagine upgrading on that. Like get a starting center in this group and everything is easier for them because yeah, like the rim protection just hasn't been consistent at all this season. And Koloko gives you something in that department for sure, but he's just unable to kind of stay on the floor and do anything offensively. And I just feel like when they do play with like Koloko and a rim protector, and the numbers kind of back this up with the fact that they've been good defensively, like guys are just a little bit more comfortable, whatever, like going for steals or just not having to play like such a tiring brand of basketball as much as without a center. And Thad, I don't think has really worked as a backup center very well. He's had his stretches for sure when Siakam was out, but recently, just the lack of rim protection when Thad is out there is really bad. So like, if they could get like a Pirtle, who again he's not a seamless fit, I get it, he's not a shooter and all that stuff, but I just think this team would make so much more sense right off the bat. And then the other thing is obviously like that third guard, obviously someone who can shoot. Every time I watch Andrew Nemhard, I cry a little bit because the Raptors could have got him. But to me, it's like Caruso would be the perfect Raptor third guard. I just like his on-ball defense, and he can knock down some shots. Good,
um,
good player.
yeah, and we were talking about like whether or not they prioritize shooting, and you said like it just hasn't worked out. But like at some point, you got to stop trying to hit home runs, and with guys who are like super athletic and have this like great defensive profile and this terrific athletic upside, and just pick a dude who is like slightly less tall and has a slightly shorter wingspan, and it like doesn't
Yeah,
necessarily have like a defensive pedigree and can actually shoot the ball. I cannot believe like the Desmond Bain pick is gonna like
same.
haunt
That's another
haunt
guy
this
I
team
can't watch.
forever.
I can't root for him.
Yeah, I cannot, and they're fun too, which is the worst part. Is like I want to like
Yeah. Oh, I like
the
the team.
Grizz,
I just can't root
but
for him
man,
specifically.
like Bane is a knockdown shooter, and that was could have so easily translated from college. If you like watch his college highlights, or I kind of remember him, like that was an obvious pick, and they went for a guy who fit the Fred mold. There are just a lot of picks and a lot of free agency decisions or trade decisions with the Thad thing, where like they're putting their draft capital or their general like player capital into finding guys with a certain athletic profile, uh, and not necessarily shooting profile. And maybe it ought to
Yeah.
be time to like pick it. Just get like a Kyle Korver, a knockdown shooter, and just play him and try to figure out the defensive stuff later.
Yeah, I was listening to the Raptors show and I thought Joe Wolfon made a good point about like they would talk about the Bane pick and like it's good to have an identity and something that you want to look like, something that you want to prioritize, but it can't come at like it can't be
Yeah.
such a narrow view that that's all you do. And
And it
he
can't come at the
mentioned,
expense of like winning basketball. Like it can't
yeah,
like
yeah.
you lean too far into something that like it's not working.
Yeah, and someone he brought up is Jordan Clarkson, who at first glance is like not at all a Raptorsy player, but like knocked down like a hell of a shooter. His passing has been a lot better this season. A ball handler who you can actually give the ball to in like tight moments when the defense has really turned up the aggression and trust him not to turn it over. Like that type of player even would just provide so much relief for this Raptors offense. And like yeah, it definitely becomes a little bit hard to defend around him, especially if Fred isn't at the peak of his powers. But to me, it feels like you have to kind of shake up the Gary spot in things where he to me seems like by far the most likely guy to be gone by the deadline. Just not even out of anything has done wrong, but just out of the like fact that like they need a shakeup and he's on an expiring contract and he makes sense as a guy who you kind of trade to just figure something out. Like maybe you get a more traditional 3 and D player so that now there's one less guy kind of vying for shots. Maybe you get a center for a similar reason, but yeah, I do think Gary is kind of the guy who you look at and is the most likely to be traded. But I think some crazy stuff could happen this deadline for sure.
I was going to say, I think Masai's probably seen all he needs to see in terms of like whether he's super committed to keeping this core together. I will say I want to reference this. Oh, I shouldn't. Should I not put this? I shouldn't even put the. There's a curse word in this, and Zarar's. I won't say the curse word. Should we put it on the screen? Anyway, look. It says
I think it's
this
okay.
in the middle stuff never works in
Yeah, it's just for
reference
the
to.
podcast. You can put it on.
Okay, I'm throwing it up there. Fire me, I dare you. They this is in reference to like whether or not you should be tanking or trying to win games, and I gotta disagree with this. Like, the Raptors are like the most successful example in recent memory of a team that did make this in the middle stuff work. They hung around and were good enough and had a good enough supporting cast until they were capable of trading for a player who was a ceiling raiser. Like, who's to say this? This is not like the future for the Raptors forever. This is not the end be all end all. They're not satisfied with like being a play-in team, but this was the blueprint that they followed. They won a championship 4 years ago. Like, how high can our expectations be? I think it does work. This is the one team. The Raptors are the one team in the recent history of the NBA that made this work. Like, I
Yeah.
couldn't be. I'm not disappointed with like the direction of the team in terms of like I think they should be tanking or they should make a win now move and go trade all their draft picks for the next star that comes up, even if that's a mediocre star. Um, yeah,
I'm kind of there.
you're
Not like a
there.
mediocre star, but I'm definitely like in the place where like these guys, Fred to a lesser extent, but Siakam, OG especially, they deserve an opportunity to win. And you have all your draft picks, right? Like, start building your next championship team. You haven't made a single trade yet to do that. When I look at Boston, who's like the biggest good comparison, it's like they got Horford with a pick, then they got White with a pick, then they got Brogdon with a pick. Start doing that because these guys need to know that you're serious about winning and that like there is help around them. If I was Siakam right now, I'd be feeling like I have no help. Um, so yeah, like I don't think they should be looking to get worse. I, okay, if this season has to become kind of a transition season, worst case, fine, but they definitely shouldn't be like trading veterans to get worse in the long term. They should be looking to get better by next season, especially at the trade deadline.
Yeah. You know what? I almost feel wrong doing this without Aiden on the podcast. But like, how are we feeling about moving back 10 picks for Thad Young now when he can't crack the rotation against the Magic and this is the team's losing games to the Magic? Like, did we want to move back those 10 spots? We wanted to trade a first round pick for Thad. I think that's like the sort of the counter argument to the statement you just made. Like, yeah, you can move picks for these guys who like are incrementally improving your team, but doesn't really like take you above and beyond. But like those picks that can come in, that could be a little tough at times. Like, that does not play. Horford, okay, Horford miraculously made himself back into an NBA player, but he was like dead money at one point. So like
Yeah.
that's another like guys fall off, especially trading for aging veterans. Like, those guys don't last forever. It's tough. I will say when you
Yeah.
were referencing the Jordan Clarkson thing about bringing in a guy who isn't necessarily a fit, and there are other comments saying, "Oh, like every team needs shooting. Like, who do I want?" When Clarkson came into that Quinn Snyder team, and I get that they were basically like that team, those Quinn Snyder teams would be basically looked at like as failures in retrospect because they did nothing in the playoffs, won a lot of regular season games. But when Jordan Clarkson came into that team, he was not a fit at all. Like, they had a different
Mhm.
identity, uh, and were a similarly like defensive team, um, or at least like postured to be because Rudy Gobert cleaned up everyone's messes. But um, they just made it work, and they're a good team now. And Clarkson's an integral part of a good NBA team. And they just picked a dude who was talented, who they didn't really care whether it was like a character fit, a like a whatever, like a basketball fit, a culture fit in terms of like who wants the shots on this team, like etc. And they just picked up a dude who's a good basketball player who could shoot the ball, and it worked out. Like sometimes you just need to like uh, swallow your pride a little bit and not try to like build a team, construct a team in such a hyper specific manner. Just pick up guys who are good NBA players and warp your strategy around them.
Yeah, and I think Donovan Mitchell is another good example of that. And like with the Raptors, especially, like the price for him was not anywhere
No,
near
it was
crazy.
low. It was low.
And
That's
and
ridiculously low.
yeah, and I was guilty of being like, well, I would worry about a Fred Donovan Mitchell backcourt defensively, but at the same time, it's like it's not always going to be Durant being available, like the perfect fit.
Mm.
Sometimes it's just going to be a guy who is going to compromise something, whether it's your defense or whatever it is. Um, but yeah, to the point about like building from the middle, it's just like the goal is to get better. The goal is not to go from a lottery team to a championship team. That never happens. Like that's why that argument is so silly. It's like even the teams that tank and go through the lottery at one point have to be in the middle, and it's like, oh, are you just going to be like, no, tank again, this team is a middling team? No, you got to figure it out. The Boston Celtics, they figured it out a year ago today. They were a losing team, and people were saying trade Jaylen Brown, and they just figured it out. They added a couple pieces, which I think is very telling and informative. They added White and Brogdon, which are two ball handlers and shooters, who ease the load on Brown and Tatum. And more than anything, I think that team kind of figured out like you got to sacrifice to win. And that's what the Raptors have not figured out. Everyone wants these touches. Everyone's pouting. Everyone's down. It's like, no, you got to sacrifice to win in this league. And to me, that's like the big mindset shift they have to make. Because if you're going to bring in more talent, that means everyone's getting less shots who is on the roster currently. So they have to kind of show that they're okay with that happening.
Yeah, and David said picks are not real until draft night. Players are real now. But I get that, but you have to appreciate like the contractual aspect of having young players who like you have control over at a low level of salary. Because then, if you want to make these like superstar ceiling raising moves, whether it be like trading for Kawhi or trading for a player who's like, wants that big contract, like the Harden trade is a classic example of like OKC didn't want to pay him. The Houston was a team that was comfortable paying him. They had the cap room. They had a flexible roster because they had a whole bunch of young talent that they could trade or basically use their young talent they had amassed through the draft as their role players around a guy you can pay a lot of money. So it's not just necessarily like it's nice to get veterans in, and that it's also nice to have guys who you don't have to pay a lot of money at all. That's why Zorar keeps
Yeah,
us around.
but I do think the Raptors are ready to make, like, they have enough young players on rookie contracts. I don't think they need to keep using every first round pick to develop more guys when like Malachi and Delano, these guys aren't getting minutes to develop. So there's diminishing returns to bringing guys in if you can't find the minutes to develop. So that's more than anything why I'm like, trade those picks. Like, even if you use that pick, what are you using it on that's going to actually, is that person going to play minutes in the NBA? And if not, what is the point? I just think the Raptors are at a point right now where they're ready to make a consolidation trade. They're ready to trade some future picks and like get serious about winning. Because right now there's a very young team still, but one that wants to win. And that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, the problem with the consolidation trade is like everyone wants a consolidation trade. If you play like any sort of fantasy sports, you always have like that guy who's like sending you
Yeah,
like three bench guys for a starter like every day, three different bench. What if I
yeah,
traded you four of my bench players for your two starting running backs? Like, look, you get
for
so many
sh-
points. You know, like this is like everyone in every aspect wants to do the consolidation trade. It's just it's tough to consolidate. Like there aren't enough guys who you consolidate for. So we'll see.
yeah,
I don't actually know who the next star was. The problem was that KD was the consolidation worthy guy. Like he was
for
there.
sure.
He was sitting there on a silver platter. Um, and the Raptors
I don't know
decided
if
he
he was
wasn't
on a silver platter.
consolidation. No,
It sounded like they
relative
were
to his
never very
ability.
serious. It just sounded like they were never really serious about trading him. Like no one got close was always the reporting.
That's yeah, that is true.
But if he does become seriously available, they need to get they need to get on that for sure. Um. Anyways, I think that's about it. You good? You good to go on that?
We should do
Do the tax
Manscaped.
man.
Or we should do we should do
Tax
Taxman,
man.
sorry.
Yeah.
Is there
Nobody
anyone?
impressed
Kem
me.
Birch? Kem
No, we're
Birch.
not giving it to any players. No.
You
Actually,
think
I think Gary is someone I've been hard on over the years, and he's having a really nice stretch right now. So I'll give it to Gary Trent Jr. He's been impressing me, just like his professionalism since getting sent to the bench. Um, and just he's the only one that can knock down a three. He's really the only like release valve that the Raptors can pass to at the top of the arc and expect to get like any any offensive creation out of. In like a typical guard manner with
yeah,
Fred playing this way.
and
Um,
I was gonna say the same. Like the guy is the only shooter, and we were talking earlier about um who would be the most likely to we would move, and you thought it was
yeah,
Gary. And like I get that, like from a contractual and just like uh player perspective, it makes sense. But from a basketball perspective, it's just like the problem in many ways is shooting. You can't just move your shooter for another guy. It's like a
yeah.
lateral move. You're right. I think
No,
there were moments tonight which, especially when they pushed late and they cut it to like I guess 11, maybe they cut it to 9 for a sec. I can't exactly remember. There were moments in which like had the tiniest bit of belief in like, oh, Gary could get hot here and maybe win the game potentially. And I'm not even gonna like. I know that sounds depressing. I'm not gonna pretend. I'm not gonna pretend like, oh, wow, I thought he was gonna do it. Like that was never really happening. But I did think he was the one bright spot, especially late in the game. So you got to give him
for
credit.
sure. And honestly, he's been driving the ball a lot better than we've seen from him in the past. Like I do still think Gary's getting better as a player. He made a nice pass today to Fred in the corner. Um, so Gary is getting better, but yeah, it's a weird contract thing, and you're right, though. If they trade him, they absolutely need to find a way to get shooting back in that deal or in a separate deal. Like, there's no way you can trade Gary and not bring in a guard who can shoot, because then there would just be one guard, and that would be problematic. But yeah, that should do it. Taxman of the game goes to Gary Trent Jr. Visit canamtax.com or call the number at the top of the screen for all your taxing needs, because tax season's right around the corner, coming up in like March, I think. So you
It's
can
right
get
around
out
the
ahead of
corner.
that. Get
It's
out
it's
ahead of it,
right
you
here.
know? I'm already thinking about it because I'm like, when will I get money back or have to give money? You know, you got to think these things early. So yeah, go to canamtax.com. They're going to help you out and they're going to get you money back that you deserve. That's about it for tonight.
Should we check with
For
Mauricio if we're allowed to do Taxman too? He was very critical of the Manscaped one. Mauricio, I'm
Oh
sorry.
yeah,
Are you okay? Are you
Mauricio,
okay
is
with
that
tax
too much
services?
solicitation on the podcast? Probably
Mauricio, I
is.
hope you're okay with it, buddy. All right. I
Anyways,
think this was a tough one. And if
this is a
honestly, if you
tough
were
one.
here, I will say, if you're here, and we got a decent viewership, considering the circumstances. If you're here, please just like the video. I know you like. If you watched it, unless you're hate watching us, like you just spent nearly an hour with us after one of the worst games I've ever seen. You should drop a like, please. And I think that's pretty much it. We appreciate all of you guys, and it's great to have this much support
Hmm.
on a night like tonight. So we're
For
thankful.
sure. For sure. We'll be back Wednesday night after the Raptors play the Kings. Thanks again. Bye.